I remember leaving the Bible study and I'm just like, everything just looked different. The world looked different. And I was just tripping out on the fact that like this whole time, like I thought I was right with God and I wasn't, and how God is real. And I'm like I said, he just became real in that moment. And I would talk about God without even trying.
Fall short, but I am sure there'll never be anyone like you. You're strong like your father, even when you were scared. When I was in trouble, you never left me there. And you love like your mother, like there's nothing to lose. You're an unsung hero, so I sing this song for you.
Are you in need of a passport in a hurry? Look no further. Global Passport Express is here to help. With our efficient and reliable services, we can process your passport in as quick as 7 days. That's right, just 7 days. And that's not all. We specialize in visas for many countries, including popular destinations like China, India, and so much more. Whether you're planning a family vacation, a business trip, or your next mission trip, Global Passport Express is your one-stop solution for all your passport and visa needs. So why wait? Reach out to us today at 210-375-7525 to speak with one of our friendly and knowledgeable representatives. They will guide you through the process and answer any questions you may have. You can also visit our website at www.globalpassportexpress.com for more information and to start your application online. It's quick, easy, and convenient. Mention this ad and receive 10% off any of our services. Don't let time constraints hold you back from your travel dreams. Trust Global Passport Express to deliver your passport fast, hassle-free, and with a smile. Global Passport Express, your passport and visa experts. Get ready to explore the world.
Back to another episode of Unsung Heroes, where we interview pastors' wives in our fellowship and hear their stories of how God has completely changed their lives. So today, I would like to introduce, we have Pastor Rick and Brittany Warren. They're in San Pedro, California, and I'm really excited to have this couple on. We've had discussions over the WhatsApp, but I've never met them in person, so I've been trying to get my husband to get us some tickets to get out to California again. But until then, I get to interview you, which I'm really excited about. So welcome to the show. Say hi, guys.
Hey.
So for the people in the audience, Rick, we've heard your testimony before, but Brittany, we have the whole other side now that we get to hear today. But for people who don't know who you are, can you just tell us where you're from, where you are currently pastoring, and tell us anything about your family, children, things like that?
Yeah, we are in San Pedro, California. We're right here on the port of Los Angeles. We're at the bottom of the map of Los Angeles. We're down here. We took over a church that has been around since 2013. We've been here almost 3 years. July will be 3 years for us. We've been saved since 2009. There in West Las Vegas with Pastor Lamb. And we have 2 boys. RJ, who's 13, will be 14 in July. Blake is 12. They love it here in California. They're turning into little beach boys. They play rugby. They got into rugby since they've been down here, and they're loving California. We're all loving California. This is our home. Brittany's from Las Vegas originally. The boys were obviously born and raised in Las Vegas as well. But we're now Californians, the great nation of California. And we're
we
loving
say
it down
extra prayers for you.
Yeah, we're loving it down here. God is moving. The church is growing. We're
Amen.
our assistant pastor, Pastor Looney, was here last month, and one of the things that he commented on was the amount of new people in the church since we've been there, and that's one of the things that we're most excited about is that the amount of people that are coming, getting locked in, and getting involved, and God is moving.
Guys are there in San Pedro when years ago my husband and I were pastoring in Inglewood, California. We would often go on outreach for San Pedro over there, and it's a beautiful city. That whole area is really, really nice, but it's just cool to be able to see a church still there and doing well and growing. But yeah, we would love to hear if you would just share with us why Brittany is an unsung hero to you and to your ministry.
Well, so that's where I was gonna go with that. Is that our church is really growing, and I've noticed a lot in other churches, especially bigger churches, where a lot of times the women are at odds with each other. They can be catty and cliquey, and there's not a good symbiotic relationship with the women in churches. And that can be an issue, but my wife has always been the type of person, ever since we were in Vegas, that she's completely opposed to that. And she goes out of her way to make relationships, to bring relationships together, to establish relationships between the women. Obviously women can the mean girls and gossip and all that, and my wife she's diametrically opposed to that. In fact, she goes out of her way. And if there's ever been a time where there was some type of an issue with her, and maybe she felt somebody felt some kind of way about her, or whatever the case may be, she would go out of her way and she would go and make him give her a hug, and just
go
just
go and peacemaker, go and make things right.
and even there was a time where there was a person that there was an issue, whatever the case was, and we met up, and me and Brittany and that husband and wife, and Brittany just told her straight up. She said, this ain't gonna happen. She said, I love you. I want to be your friend. We're gonna have a good relationship, and if we don't, that's your fault, because I'm extending the olive branch now. I love you, and we're gonna be friends. And that's just the way she is. She's always been vocal about that. We're not gonna have cliques. We're not gonna have a bad blood. We're not gonna have tension. We're not gonna have none of that. And she goes out of her way to make sure that that there's peace in the church. Among the women, among anybody. And even she checks me sometimes. Babe, you got to keep your heart right.
Right.
Because as a pastor, sometimes things can get a little frustrating, and people can be frustrating, and she always she always reels me back in, and that's one of the things that I'm happy about is the fact that she she's not afraid to tell me when I'm wrong.
Right.
Not necessarily in a bad way, but she'll tell me, hey, this, that, or other, and so I'm not too proud to accept her her wisdom and her input and her insight. It's been a huge blessing. She saved my bacon a couple times, because I would be ready to go off, and she would talk me off the ledge,
Right. And that's a blessing. You need a steady personality to be a pastor's wife, for sure.
Yeah. And she has that for the most part. No, but
Oh boy, maybe we should cut it off now while it's still going good, right?
no, but and even when since we've been here, she's gotten women's book studies, women's Bible studies. She has women's fellowships, women's night out. She keeps the women together.
Right.
Keeps them in one accord, keeps the peace. And even when she has a laugh. I don't know if you'll get to hear it on here, but she has a laugh that's it's easy to recognize. And even when we left Las Vegas, that's one of the things that people said they missed was her laugh, because it can be loud at times, and but it's an infectious laugh. When she starts laughing, everybody starts laughing.
Right.
And that's one of the things that she's known for, actually, is her laugh. People recognize her laugh over everybody. They say, I'm listening for it. And sometimes we'll be playing, where's my wife? And then I'll say, wait a minute, let me wait for her to laugh.
Conference.
And conference. Where's my wife? And I'll listen. I was, okay, she's over there. And so I'll be able to find her just because of her laugh.
Thank God she has a joyful spirit, huh?
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure, and she's just, just very welcoming, when she meets people, she sometimes, when she meets women, they'll think she's a little strange because she won't shake their hand. She'll give them a hug right off the bat, and, no, it's a blessing. She's a great mother. She stays at home right now since we've been here. She's homeschooling the kids, because there's no way we're going to put them in the LA school district down here.
Right.
That's just not going to happen. And so, she's taking the hit. She's making a sacrifice to stay at home with the boys, and they do their daily devotionals, and they read together and pray together. And there was a time where they were doing their praise and worship aerobics in the morning before they start school. And no, it's just, it's one of those things, where if you were to look at us on paper, and list her life, list my life, positives, negatives, where we grew up, this, that, and other, you would look at it and you would say, there's no way that can work. But God knew what he was doing when he put us together,
Right.
And I believe, I know everybody probably says it, but, I believe we're the perfect couple, and God put us together, and here we are, 15 years later, 14 years being married, 15 years being together, two wonderful boys, a thriving church. And, like I said, in the beginning, in 2009, when we first got together, we first met, you couldn't make me believe that this would be going on right now.
Right.
You couldn't have paid me to believe this.
Mm-hmm.
But here we are, and people say it all the time. She hates it when they say it, but I consider it a compliment. And they'll say, "Man, how did you get her? You're lucky." And she takes it as an insult towards me, but I take it as a compliment.
Right.
She is beautiful, and she's got a great personality, and I'm very lucky, blessed.
Amen.
God to put this together, and because it only could have been God.
Right.
This is not the work of me or her or anybody else. This is the work of God, that we're perfect together, right? We feed off each other great,
Right.
She can sing, and she can rap, and I produce music, she's an artist, I'm an artist. We love to do outdoor stuff together. I mean, it's
just serving God together. Yeah.
And it's been awesome. And like you said, the last 15 years, and and just looking forward to what God is going to do,
Amen.
for us
Amen.
in the future.
Well, I appreciate that. Those are some really encouraging words. What a blessing. But we'll release you to go, Pastor Rick. I appreciate you popping out. Wait. But before, I just want everyone to know you are originally from Indianapolis, but from my family, Me and my family, we wanna wish you a giant hooday. You can go.
Hey, goodbye.
Bye.
Thank
Thank you. That was some really nice things he said about you. He obviously treasures your character, and you've obviously have a heart for people, or you wouldn't be doing what you're doing, right?
Yes.
But let's start at the beginning. How did you grow up? How were you raised? Where were you raised? Just kind of like, what was your foundation? Did you have a like religious or Christian or any type of foundation, spiritual foundation, or what was it? What was your household like growing up?
So, I grew up with my mom. Like my parents were married after I was born, like right after I was born. I was a newborn and they got married. Soon after that, they got divorced and I lived with my mom. I would see my dad on the weekends. Growing up, I remember going to church a lot with my grandparents, but not with my parents. My dad was never into the church. My mom, I don't remember her being into the church at all, just grandparents. So anytime I would go, it would be grandparents. But it was very it was religious.
Right.
And so it was either Baptist or Kojic that we would go to. And I just knew that church is a place that you should go to on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
So I was never taught like God can change your life or anything like that. It was, as you could do what you want as long as Sunday you go to church. And so that's pretty much what it was. I didn't know God.
Right.
I didn't know like who God really was. And so just looking back at certain things that I did growing up, I'm like, I can see like inherited curses.
Right.
So like cheating, and there's just different things that happen within my life. And I'm like, my gosh, like the things that I've done, it's always kind of happened within our family. But they also didn't have a relationship with Christ. Like I said, it was all like completely religious. So let me see. So I lived with my mom up until the 5th grade. And
did you have siblings, or was it just you?
So I'm the oldest of 6.
Mm-hmm.
And so my parents were separated. So my mom had kids. She has 2 boys besides me. And then my dad, I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters, but one of my sisters passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And so once I hit the 5th grade, I moved in with my dad. And that's when I seen like the family dynamic. It wasn't until I moved in with him. Because like I said, my mom, she was single and she would have boyfriends in and out constantly. And so once I moved in with my dad, like I said, it was a family dynamic, but it still wasn't like no type of religion. My stepmom, she is Catholic. And so we would go there for like funerals, things like that. But that was it.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. Once, I guess we can fast forward to after high school. Like I said, I would go to church because I felt like that was the thing to do. So even though my parents didn't go, even though, I wasn't surrounded by that, I knew like, okay, go to church on Sunday. So I would go party throughout the week. I would drink, fornicate, everything. But then Sunday, no matter what, like I would be in church. And my grandmother would tell me like, all you have to do is say this prayer. So I'm thinking as long as I prayed and I said a prayer of salvation, then I'm good. It didn't matter how I looked.
Right.
That's the religious world. So, all these people would be going to church on Sunday, but then cussing their kids out in the parking lot. And there was no change. Or you see those same people in the club.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, just God wasn't real to me. Like I knew of God. You go to church. Yeah, I go to church. I can name the church and everything.
Right.
But there was no relationship there at all.
Because we had a lady in our church in Texas. She and she was like, this church is so different, because she was going to another church, years before, but she was one of those club girls. She was always at the clubs, but she said she went to church and the ushers that were seating her had the same stamp on their hands of the club she went to. And she was like, Miss Ryan, this wasn't a nice club. Okay. She's like, and this guy was seating people in the church. I'm like, well, it's about a
Yeah.
relationship, not just
Yeah.
what you do on Sunday, So
And
I think that's everywhere, just that religious world. If I go to church on Sunday, then I'm good, but no.
right.
What kind of
It's safe.
like plans or dreams did you have for yourself as you were growing up? Was there anything that you were like, this is what I want in life?
So I wanted to be a doctor. That
Mhm.
was my thought process. Because I remember my dad would always be like, you need to do something like, you always hear doctor, lawyer, that kind of thing. And so I remember thinking like a doctor, I want to be a doctor. Because my thing was, I want to help people feel better about themselves. But my idea of a doctor was plastic surgery. So that's what I
Right.
wanted to get into.
Mhm.
And so, after school, I realized I was like, I don't even like going to school. So that's not going to work.
Right.
But I do hair. So I'm a cosmetologist, hair,
Mhm.
skin, and nails. And so it's the same thing, except not permanent.
Right.
So I still got to do that. It was like, I wanted to make people feel better about themselves, about their life,
So
that
we
type
have Rick the barber and Brittany the beautician for real?
of Yeah. Yeah, I met
Nice.
him in hair school. So he had the barbershop across the street from my hair school.
Nice.
And that's how that happened.
In your life before you, and we'll get to your salvation story where you completely surrendered, but was there anything in your life that impacted you, that made you think like, I don't want to live this way anymore, or anything maybe spiritually that hit you that kind of opened things up for you, or were you just living life?
So, I mean, I was living life, but not the right way, obviously. I remember
Mm-hmm.
going to different parties and things like that, and going home at night thinking, like, what are you doing? Like, I felt used. It
Yeah.
didn't, like, even if I wasn't like sleeping with them, it didn't even have to be that. At the end of the night, I just felt used and I felt dirty.
Yeah. Yep.
And the party life, it gets old real quick.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one time, so I wasn't even old enough to go to the club, but doing hair, you meet different people. And so there was a club that I was able to get a bunch of my friends in all the time. And so we didn't go every weekend, but we went often. And I remember overhearing this guy talking to one of his friends, and he was like, yeah, they're here all the time. That's what he said. And I was like, I don't want to be known for that. Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
terrible. That impacted me because I'm like, who wants to be known as like the person that's here all the time? You know what I mean? To
Right.
me, it
Right.
just was like a bad look.
Right. So let's go back. You mentioned in your childhood family inherited curses. You
Mhm.
mentioned cheating. Was that what was going on with your parents? And did that impact
So,
you and how you viewed like marriage or relationships? Did that like ingrain something in you that had to be broken?
so I don't think I had I didn't have what is the word? I'm looking for a word. I didn't have like a model of what a relationship or a real marriage looked like.
Mm-hmm.
All the marriages that I seen growing up was broken.
Broken.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah. So just, it was crazy. I was just thinking about it the other day, like, oh my gosh, like everybody is cheated in my family, literally on both
Right.
sides.
Mm-hmm.
And so just unfaithfulness. And so, like, my mom would always cheat. My dad, he's cheated. And then their parents, the same thing. Except my grandmother on my mom's side. I don't remember everything with, anything with her. But as far as I know, like everybody's done it. And even once I got older, I would always say, like, I don't want to be like my mom because we would see different people. I would see different people come in and out constantly.
Right.
And so that was something I was like, I never want to be like that.
Mm-hmm.
But as I got older, I started to see my life and it was turning out exactly like hers. Everything I didn't want to be, I was turning into.
Right.
And then I'm just like, how did I get here? And then it goes
Right.
back to like loneliness. You don't want to feel lonely. And so you feel like you need somebody there. And yeah, like I never knew that would be me. And then
Right.
there's things that, well, since moving out here, there's things that I found out about my family. And now I'm like, that's why this is like with my mom specifically. Like, there has been things that has happened to her in childhood that I just found out about. And I'm like, well, this is why she's like this. Like,
Right.
she doesn't have a role model of like how to be a parent. Like, I dealt with mom issues a lot growing up, and
Right.
I always felt like, oh, you should do this because you're a mom. But I had this idea of how mom should be, and she didn't fit that. But now I know why. Because like her parents weren't good role models for her.
Probably just dealing with her own childhood trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And it was never. So did your parents, either one of them, ever become Christians that you know of, or?
So that's the thing. So my grandmother's always been the one to say, like, it's my mom's mom. She would be like, as long as you say this prayer, then you're right with God. And so my mom, she thinks she's saved. And so she's like, your mom's saved. She's just not converted. And I'm like, what does that mean? Like, she's not trying to live for God, nothing. So she just lives her everyday life, doing what she wants and falling out, and she thinks she's right with God. And so
Right.
the way, like, I've witnessed to both of my parents over and over again. And so that wasn't working. So I would be like, okay, with my mom specifically, if I tell her the things that I struggle with, then she'll realize, okay, these things are wrong. Maybe I need to change something. And so I've gone that way with it, but it hasn't clicked for her at all.
Right.
So
What about any of your
her.
siblings?
My siblings, one of my brothers, he claims to be an atheist because he hung around my godfather a lot. And so he claims atheism. One of my brothers, he has Down syndrome. So his mom, he lives with his mom part-time, and then my dad. And so I know he goes to like Bible camp. He has an idea of who Jesus is, and he's gone to church with us before too, but I don't know how much he really knows. Like, that's pretty hard.
Right.
The sister, she claims Catholicism, but even that, it's more, they know where I stand, and I just try to talk to them about Jesus. We have our conversations, so we're praying for them. And then on my mom, my two brothers, girl, they're out there, okay? They're just living.
Right.
So a lot of times, my brother, on my mom's side, he would come to the barbershop all the time. And in Vegas, everybody from the church would be there, like at the barbershop. And so he got witnessed to so much, and he would never receive it. He never wanted to live the life. And because of that, because of him not listening, he has 4 kids by different moms. Well, one's twins. He has a set of twins, but he's living his life reckless. And he was warned time and time again, and he never wanted to live the life. He never received it. But God has put different people in his path constantly to try to reach out to him, and he's not hearing it out. But I'm believing God for my siblings, and that he'll do something in them.
So you, in your teens, early 20s, you were going through cosmetology school, but you were still going to the clubs and stuff. When did you actually meet your husband? Did you meet him before pre-salvation, or were you
pre-salvation for sure?
Yeah, so tell us a little bit how you met him, and then we'll get into your salvation story, because I was telling my husband when I had first approached you about doing your testimony, you texted back. I wrote it down. The quote is, you said, "Girl, I'm down. I got delivered for a reason." And so I read that to my husband, and he said, "Oh, that's going to be a good one." He said, "If somebody's that willing to testify, that's going to be a good one." So I'm looking forward to hearing your salvation story. But let's, before that, how did you guys meet, and what was that whole dynamic like, meeting, out in the world?
So I was a partier. I partied. I would drink. I wasn't big on like drugs. I would smoke weed, but not all the time. When I was in hair school, I think that's when things got the craziest. We would go club, drink, and then go to school. And so in our hair school, we would sit in these rows, and we would all party together, and the people in the rows, in the middle rows, and we would all be hung over, our face planted in our desks in hair school because the night we had
Right.
the prior night or whatever. And so it was just crazy. So I met my husband. He, like I said, he had the barbershop across the street from the hair school, where next door there's a 7-Eleven, and we would always go across the street for snacks and stuff. That was the closest place to get snacks. And so it was like, I want to say it was the first time that I went over there, and this guy comes running out of the barbershop, and like, so there's two sides to this story, obviously.
Oh, my husband, I think.
So he comes running out, and he tries to talk to me, and I just looked at him like, no, and I just walked off. I was very rude back in the day. I don't know why he dealt with me, but I was very rude. And so anytime I would go, he was constantly like trying to talk to me. And so everything kind of turned into something. So it was, oh, hi. And then we would have a conversation, and then he asked for my number. And in my head, I'm like, okay, well, we can be cool. But that's all I'm thinking. Like, I didn't see him like that. And so, what happened? So we would talk on the phone. At this point, I'm like, we're friends. And it wasn't.
How old were you both at this time?
Oh, gosh. I was either 18 or 19. And so.
And he was what, 40?
No. I mean, not that it's a big difference, but he was, what, 37, 38?
When you were 18?
Yeah. And so I remember I told my mom about him, and she was like, I don't want him knowing where I live. Like, she was not okay with it at all. And so he literally, the next day is when he asked me out. And I'm like, my mom just told me, like, she doesn't want this man knowing where we live or anything. So I'm trying to figure out how I could be sneaky and make it happen. So I'm like, well, if he parks around the corner, technically he won't know where I live. And so he invited me to go with him. One of his friends, he raced for NHRA. And so he invited me to go with him to the race. And so he picks me up and we go. Well, there's 2 parts to it. So before the second part, I was like, I got to get home, because my mom she told me, make sure this house is clean before I get home. So I'm like, as long as I have the house clean, like, I'm good. So we're on our way back to the house, and she calls me, and she's like, where are you at? And I said, I'm hanging out with Rick, but I'm on my way home right now to go clean. And so she's like, okay. And so I was like, wait, okay, that's it? I thought I was going to get like reprimanded or something was going to happen, but she just seemed okay with this. So I'm like, all right, I guess this is okay. So then after that, we were constantly hanging out. And 2 months after our first date, he proposed. And so, well, let me backtrack a little bit, because I didn't like him, remember, at first. And so,
did that age difference bother you, or was that not a big deal to you at all?
I didn't know how old he was at first. So yeah, I didn't know his age at first. And then once I told my mom about him, that's when, I knew the age difference, and I told my mom, and that's how it was before the first date. And I don't know if I didn't really care, because I didn't see him like that. I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm going to be with this guy. I'm thinking, we're hanging out, nothing more than that. So after we went to the races, the NHRA races, sometime after that, he's like, do you want to come to my house? And in my head, I'm like, for what? And I'm just like, if he tries anything, I'm going to go. But if he tries anything, then this is done. Like, don't try to kiss me. Don't try to do anything.
Right.
So we go, and I'm just learning about him. And then I realized we have all this stuff in common. Like he said, we are into, like art. And so, he draws, I draw. He was showing me different pictures, like on his computer. And I'm just like, wow, like fishing and camping and all this stuff. Like, it's just a lot of stuff that I was into. Obviously, we both do hair. And I remember after, it had to be like 2:00 in the morning. And he was like, all right, you ready to go home? And I'm like, yeah. And so he drops me off. He didn't try nothing. And I go home that night and I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I like him.
Right. Right.
So I got butterflies and I'm like, my goodness. So yes. So at this point, I like him. 2 months after our first date, he proposed. And so I go home and I tell him, I'm like, Mom, I'm engaged. And she's like, yeah, right. Where's your ring at then? And I showed her and she realized it was real. Because you know how people, they say, oh, I'm going to get married to this person or whatever. Well, I had a ring and it was real. And she's like,
Right.
you're stupid. You're stupid. And she's just telling me how dumb I am.
Mm.
And so by this time, I believe I'm already like going to his house constantly. And so I still don't know exactly where we stand. Like, we're together, but I'm like, okay, is somebody else in this house too? And so I would start to leave stuff at his house because I'm like, okay, if somebody's in this house, they're going to know I'm in this house too. And that's how we're going to find out what's going on. And so he comes up to me when I'm doing laundry at his house one day and he's like, well, you already have stuff here, so you could just start leaving stuff if you want. And so I'm like, okay. And so my mom starts to realize my stuff's starting to, disappear from my room. And she's like, I know what you're doing, and this is not okay. And so I'm like, what? And she's like, I'm not stupid. If you're going to do this, you need to do it right. You need to move back. So then it became like this battle because he's telling me, you're here. I don't want to be driving back and forth because I lived completely like across town where he stayed. And so he's like, it doesn't make sense to be going, back and forth and we see each other anyway. And so I ended up moving back with my mom, but it didn't last long. I don't even remember like how long it was, but yeah, it wasn't long before I came back. And things were great at first until they weren't. So the longer you're with somebody, your stuff starts to come out. And so it was around, I would say, no, before that. September, October. And things started to get rocky because he would tell me to do stuff or don't do this. And I felt like he was trying to be my dad. So then I'm like, no, you're not going to tell me what to do. You're not my dad. And there was this battle. And so we bumped heads a lot. And where he lived, it was near the strip. And a lot of the prostitutes would walk up and down the street, like not too far from his house. And so when I would throw my tantrums or I felt like he was being some kind of way, I would just leave. Well, if I left, he would come follow me. And he'd be like, this is not the area to be doing this.
Right.
And so he would follow me in his car until I was done throwing my fit, and then we would go back to the house. But that went on for a while, that whole battle. And then it was around before then. So like I said, I was religious, right? I put on this religious whole act or whatever. So I would ask him, like, I want you to go to church with me. It was a constant, come to my church, come to my church. And he would always be like, I'm not trying to do that. Because what he saw church to be was like it was bad. He would have pastors come into his barbershop in, I think, Indiana. And there was a pastor and he told them, if you knew, what did he say? If you knew the car that I drove and the things that I had, you would bow down to me and say, what must I do to be saved? And so
my
for
gosh.
that to be, that was what he thought Christianity was. He was like, I don't want to be a part of that, It was a joke. And so anytime I would be like, come to my church, he's like, no. And that was his only off day at the time too. And he wasn't trying to go to church on his only off day. So finally, out of all this time, he ends up saying he'll go. So we go to the church. His biggest thing was, I don't want to go pay for some pastor's Bentley. I don't want to hear about, I need to give to the church. And he didn't want to hear that. So we go to the church. They preach about money, tithes, paying your tithes.
Oh, no.
He's never coming back. The one time I get him to come
and
they got money, he's never coming back. So we go in the car and I already know like where his head's at. I'm like, did you even listen to the sermon? And he goes, yeah, I heard it. And so I was like, well, what did he say? And he starts telling me things that the pastor said. So he listened to it, but I knew after that day, he wasn't going to be bothered. So because that was his only off day, eventually I stopped going myself.
Right.
Then, so Pastor Larry Shomo was Pastor Larry Shomo now, but back then it was just Larry Shomo. He got his hair cut by Rick, by my husband. And so one day he invited him to come to a play that his wife was having, Creed. And he goes, well, we won't be able to make it to the play, but I'll make sure we're there on Sunday. And so he just felt like he needed to go because he was a good client. He came every week, that kind of thing.
Right.
So so before that happened, I don't know when he invited him, but we were at a point in our relationship where we both knew it was over. We were just waiting on the other person to say something. And this was in November of 2009. So we're kind of just coasting. Well, I got a phone call from a guy that I had talked to previously. And he's like, I want to see you. Because I stopped dealing with all the old people like I used to hang out with and everything. And so anyways, he's like, yeah, I want to see you and we should hang out and da-da-da. And so I'm like, all right, like, let's do this. Because I made a plan on Monday. So this is on a Friday. So I'm like, on Monday, I'm going to get all my stuff out of his house while he's at work, and I'm just going to be done with him. And so I call my girlfriend and I tell her, we're going to go hang out with one, this person. And he invited us to go to a kickback. He was a part of this party crew in Vegas, and they were having this private function in one of the casinos. So I end up going down there, and just before we went, so my girlfriend picks me up and we went to a liquor store and I bought a bottle of vodka. It was a clear bottle, it was like this big, and I smashed the whole thing before I even got to the whole kickback thing. So I already was drinking. Then we get to this place, we go to this room, and there's a bunch of drinks there, and I'm drinking those too. And Rick, he's texting me, and so I was done dealing with that too. So I gave my phone to my girlfriend, and I was like, just text him for me. So he's thinking he's talking to me, but he's not. He's talking to my girlfriend through text, and I go to hang out with the guy. And so I'm thinking I'm just gonna move on from him, and this is it. Well, that night we almost did something, but in the back of my head, I'm like, I haven't finished this chapter, so I can't move on to another chapter. And so I didn't do anything with the guy. And my girlfriend, she's like, we gotta go. Rick's texting and he's not happy. And so we go to the house and I can't even walk. I was so drunk I could not walk. And we end up going upstairs. He's helping me upstairs, and I can just imagine how bad it looked. Like, he's trying to talk to me. He's like, is this cute to you? This is what you think is cute? This is what type of person you want to be? He's just talking.
So was he not a drinker at all? Did he not drink?
No, he would, but it was like, I had other plans. Like, I'm talking to this guy at this party, so I wasn't going to invite him to a party that some other guy invited me to. And so, and not only that, he's not trying to go drink and hang out with a bunch of kids. So yeah. Yeah. So, so we get upstairs, and it was just like, he was just talking, and I'm just like, whatever. And so I'm like, just shut up and kiss me, all drunk. And so he kissed me, and then I was like, oh my gosh. And I ran to the bathroom and I puked my brains out. And I just remember him just like, oh my gosh, just, making his comments. Yeah. And so I finished puking, and then I'm brushing my teeth, and he's just still talking. Well, that is the night that my oldest son was conceived. Obviously, I don't know this, whatever. So then the next day is when he tells me, oh, I was talking to this guy from the barbershop, and he invited us to come to church. And I was like, wait, what? He's thinking about going to church? And so he goes, I told him, we wouldn't go to this play, but we'll go to church on Sunday. So I was shocked. And he's like, are you down to go? And I'm like, yeah, of course. Because that's what I wanted us to do. But only because, like I said, Sunday, you're supposed to go to church.
Go to church, right?
Yeah. So we end up going to church. Pastor Lamb preaches. We go Sunday morning, and they had an altar call at the end. And he raised his hand, and I'm like, what the heck is going on? Because he's not that guy at all.
Right.
So, they have the altar call. He goes up, and then Larry's wife, Cree, she comes up to me, and she's like, do you want to give your life to Christ, and you want to pray? And I was like, girl, I'm already saved.
Mm-hmm.
What church? She's asking me questions, and I'm answering them. And she's like, all right. I was nowhere near salvation. Like,
right.
What a joke. Obviously, I know that now. But, yeah, in my head, I was saved. So we ended up going that night as well. I ran into one of my cousins. So then at that point, I realized one of my cousins went to the church too, Eric Franklin.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he'd been going for years. I didn't grow up around him like that because I grew up with my dad, and he's on my mom's side.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, that was a trip to me. So after that day, anything the church had, we went to. And so I still didn't have that revelation, like who God is, but we went to church constantly. We went to outreaches, everything. So there was an at-home Bible studies, and it was on the book of Revelation. And so they're talking about the rapture, and it was put on by Larry and my cousin Eric. And so afterwards, I had all these questions because I don't remember ever hearing anything about the rapture. And, when I would previously
Right.
So afterwards, I got some of the women aside, and I'm asking them all these questions. And in the midst of our conversation, there was this click that went off in my head. And I was just like, my gosh, I know who God is. In an instant, I zoned out, and it was God dealt with me. In that instant, I knew that how I was living wasn't right. I knew that if Jesus was to come back, I was not going to heaven. I would have been left there. In an instant, everything it was real. And so I just told them, I was like, yo, you guys got to hold on. And I went to go find Rick, and I said, listen, either we get married tonight or I'm leaving. And he was like, what? He was like, what did they tell you? But they didn't say any of that. Just God dealt with me. And I said, I ain't going to hell for nobody. And he was just tripping out because, where is this coming from? But God dealt with me, and I knew he was real, and I knew that I wasn't going to miss this rapture. So he goes, we can't get married tonight. And I said, why? We live in Vegas. It didn't happen. So yeah, it was around that happened. Then after that, we end up finding out that I was pregnant. Because once we started coming to church, we realized, we can't be fornicating and stuff.
Right.
And so that's how I know, when that whole thing happened. But what's crazy about that is if we didn't go to church that Sunday, I would have been a single mom.
Right.
If we didn't make
that would have been continuing on what you saw growing up.
Exactly. And so
right.
It's like God gives us chances to accept him. And so if we didn't accept him, that would have made my life completely different.
Right.
I would have been a single mom. Oh my gosh, I probably would have been messing around with different people, just a mess. But thank God, he got saved that day, and we continued to go because that changed my life forever, obviously.
Right.
And
well, we definitely want to hear the rest of your story, how you finally did get married and the stepping into ministry in the church and all those things. But we're going to say goodbye to our regular listeners right now. We thank you so much for joining us. And when we come back, we'll hear the rest of Miss Brittany Warren's testimony, how she gets married and they become disciples in the church, and how they eventually get sent out to their work that they're pastoring now. But We'll save the rest of the conversation for our premium subscribers. If you have not subscribed to the podcast, it's less than $5 a month, and all the proceeds from this podcast go directly to world evangelism. We write a check at conference towards world evangelism. So we say goodbye to our regular listeners, and we'll be right back.
You're my unsung hero, and I sing this song for you.